Hello. I'd like to begin by thanking Rock Around the Blockade for organising today's event. It's a pleasure to be speaking here on behalf of the Revolutionary Communist Group. We're coming together at a time when the genocide of the Palestinian people by Israel, backed by the US and Britain, the world's most powerful imperialist forces, has again escalated. We're witnessing yet another bloodbath. You may wonder what this has to do with Cuba and progressive Latin America, and some people up here have already mentioned, but let me elaborate a little bit. Now more than ever, in the wake of accumulating imperialist offensives such as those in Palestine, Iraq, Afghanistan, Cuba sets such an essential example of another way to exist. In the media, especially around this time of the revolution's 50th anniversary, we can read several articles entitled something to the effect of, "Is Cuba still relevant today?" with the bourgeois press constantly belittling Cuba's achievements. But I would argue that as warfare gets more brutal and the competition for world domination increases, Cuba becomes more relevant, vitally important in fact. Because Cuban society is built totally around an ideology that puts human need at the fore. One would think that, if only for the survival of our species, this should be a given. However, the reality we live in is quite different, as the genocide in Palestine yet again proves. But in Britain, we live in the belly of the beast, and so the parasitic privileges this affords us means that we have yet to truly feel the repercussions of the barbaric capitalist world that we live in. Capitalism is a system under which profit dictates. Profit is the most important part of society. This makes no sense. Capitalism is always lauded as the most efficient system, but in a world where 80% of people are poor and starving, in a world which has been plundered for resources which are fast running out, in a world which is completely unravelling due to this latest crisis of capitalism, it is obvious that this system is just not sustainable. Fidel Castro has for years urgently warned against capitalism's rapacious destruction of this planet. But the primary concerns of capitalism are not the protection of the environment, the feeding and sheltering of society, but the accumulation of capital and profit. This latest crisis, which has come to be known as the credit crunch, has sent economies across the world positively reeling. Unemployment in Britain is rapidly climbing towards 3 million. Is this the efficient system that our governments promote? 3 million unemployed? When considering these most basic but profound differences between socialist and capitalist society, it comes as no surprise that it is the leaders of progressive Latin American countries who have been the only world leaders to take decisive action in protest at what is happening to the Palestinian people. Being rabidly anti-revolutionary Cuba, Israel does not have an embassy in Cuba, but the Cuban government has declared its unconditional support of Palestinian resistance, and the Cuban journalists have been writing articles exposing Israel's paper-thin excuses about the war. Suarez has expelled the Israeli ambassador and embassy staff, and both he and Morales have suspended all diplomatic relations with Israel. Morales is actively trying to have senior Israeli officials charged with genocide at the International Criminal Court. It's worth mentioning at this point that in Jordan, protesters went and threw shoes at the Egyptian embassy and then went and threw flowers at the Venezuelan embassy. Yay. As our Labour government again does little but back the United States in their ghastly rhetoric about Hamas, it falls to us to do what we can in solidarity with the Palestinian people. And so, as well as demonstrating, attending meetings, boycotting Israeli goods, we must realise that in order to bring about a new world order, we have to promote those countries already trying to do so. Cuba, Venezuela, Bolivia, Ecuador, these countries are at the fore of this movement. I'd like to quote from my comrade's recent speech at a rally in Palestine in Newcastle. She said, "Che flags and T-shirts are a common sight in the occupied Palestinian territories, a symbol of resistance and freedom. Equally, in Cuba, the Palestinian people are considered brothers and sisters, and their history is studied in depth by all Cuban children. Cuba also provides concrete solidarity to Palestine. On a brigade last year, I met some Palestinian medical students who were studying for free thanks to the socialist government. Their specialism was in artificial limb technology, which highlights the barbarity of the situation imposed by Israel, such that medical resources that Palestine has must be focused not on extending people's lives or ensuring good health, but repairing the human damage done by the occupation. Unsurprisingly, Israel consistently votes in the US to maintain the Israel consistently votes in the UN to maintain the US blockade of Cuba. It is vitally important to understand that crimes such as this genocide in Palestine, the invasion of Iraq, the complete levelling of Afghanistan will continue to occur under imperialism. Because imperialism has no regard for humanity. It is a world order in which countries are divided up and dominated by a few powerful nations in order to expand capital and increase profit, in order to ensure that a tiny minority of the world's population can lead parasitic and luxurious lives. Under socialism, Cuba has achieved that which no capitalism system has been able. People have food and shelter, access to free healthcare and free education. Revolutionary Cuba has never been associated with the torture of any human being. Rather than exporting arms to countries like Britain, who proudly claimed the title last year of the world's largest arms exporter, Cuba supports and exports doctors and healthcare systems. This tiny island has become famous for providing huge amounts of aid and medical support to the most remote and deprived corners of the earth. Not only that, Cuba offers a free medical education to even US citizens if they cannot afford to study in their home country, on the condition that they go and practice in deprived areas where doctors are most needed. It is incredible, I can't stress this enough, it's incredible that these gains have been made despite decades of deliberate underdevelopment by colonial powers, a crippling and illegal US blockade, and the hardship and isolation of the special period.